The ship that dropped out of hyperspace looked wrong. That was the first thing every sensor operator in the Coalition fleet noticed. It wasn't just that it was different from other human vessels they had seen, it was different in a way that made their equipment malfunction. Captain Lee Tae-min stood on the bridge of the Nemesis Protocol and smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile, the kind of smile that made smart people take a step back and look for exits. Around him, his crew worked with the efficiency of predators who had found their hunting ground. "Report," Lee said to his tactical officer. "Coalition fleet is down to 37 ships," reported Lieutenant Commander Han Yu-jin without looking, up from her console. "Vorthon's swarm has approximately 200 vessels. Estimated time until Coalition collapse is 4 hours, 12 minutes. Lee nodded. Han had been a military prosecutor before she joined his crew, the kind who sent war, criminals to prison, for the rest of their lives. She was very good with numbers and even better with finding ways to hurt people legally. Both skills were useful here. "What about the Vorthons themselves?" Lee asked. "Standard hive mind species," answered Chief Engineer Oh Min-seo from her station. "Collective consciousness, rapid adaptation protocols, biological ship construction." She paused, running one hand through her short black hair. "They're actually quite impressive from an engineering standpoint." Min-seo had been kicked out of 3 different research institutions for conducting experiments that violated ethical guidelines. Her specialty was taking other species' technology and finding ways to make it work against them. Lee had recruited her personally after she had been arrested for weaponizing a children's toy. Impressive enough to give the Coalition trouble, Lee agreed, but not impressive enough to be a real challenge. He walked to the communication console and opened a channel to the Coalition flagship. The face that appeared on screen belonged to a tall alien with blue skin and what looked like gills on his neck. Kethran, if Lee remembered correctly. "This is Fleet Admiral Kang Dae-ho of the Coalition Defense Force," the alien said. "Please identify yourself." "Captain Lee Tae-min, Earth Special Operations," Lee replied. "We're here to assist with your pest problem." "One ship?" Admiral Kang looked confused. "Earth sent one ship to fight a swarm of 200 vessels? Quality over quantity, Admiral," Lee said. "We prefer to work smart rather than work hard." In the background, Lee could see other figures on the Coalition bridge. One of them stepped forward, a small human woman with dark hair. Ambassador So-ra, according to his briefing files. "Captain Lee," she said, "I spoke with Admiral Park. He said you would handle the situation, but I have to ask, how can one ship make a difference against these numbers?" Lee's smile widened. "Ambassador, your people have been fighting the Vorthons the wrong way. You've been treating this like a military engagement, trying to destroy their ships and kill their soldiers. That's not how Earth fights wars." "Then how do you fight them?" Admiral Kang asked. "We don't fight wars, Admiral. We solve problems." Lee turned to his crew. "Han, what's the Vorthon response to our arrival?" 3 hive cruisers breaking off from the main swarm," Han reported. "They're moving to intercept us. Looks like they want to test our capabilities." "Perfect," Lee said. "Min-seo, are we ready for the demonstration?" "All systems green," Min-seo replied, her fingers dancing across her control panel. "Protocol 7 is loaded and ready for deployment." Lee turned back to the communication screen where the Coalition officers were watching with growing confusion and concern. "Admiral Kang, I suggest you pull your ships back to a safe distance," Lee said. "What you're about to see might be disturbing to people who still believe in civilized warfare." "What are you planning?" Ambassador So-ra asked, and Lee could hear the worry in her voice. "We're going to show the Vorthons what happens when you threaten human allies," Lee replied, "and we're going to make sure they remember the lesson." He cut the communication link and turned to face his crew. The bridge of the Nemesis Protocol was darker than most ships, with red lighting that gave everything a bloody cast. The walls were covered in displays showing not just tactical information, but psychological profiles of the enemy, their communication patterns, their social structures, their fears. "Contact in 2 minutes," Han announced. Lee walked to the center of the bridge where a holographic display showed the approaching Vorthon ships. They were ugly things, like giant insects made of metal and flesh. They pulsed with organic rhythms. and left trails of some kind of biological matter in their wake. "Captain," came a voice from the communication station. "The Vorthons are attempting to scan us. Should I raise shields?" "No," Lee said. "Let them look. I want them to see exactly what they're dealing with." The 3 Vorthon cruisers approached, in perfect formation, their organic hulls rippling with alien purpose. They were larger than the Nemesis protocol, and their weapon systems were already charging for the attack. "They're hailing us," the communications officer reported. "Put it through," Lee said. The main screen flickered to life, showing something that barely looked alive. The Vorthon commander was a writhing mass of tentacles and chitinous plates, with multiple eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence. "Human vessel," the creature spoke in a voice like grinding metal. "You will surrender or be consumed. Your flesh will feed the swarm and your ship will be absorbed into our collective." Lee looked at the alien for a long moment, then began to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that serial killers made in old movies. "You know what's funny about your species?" Lee said when he stopped laughing. "You think you're the apex predator in this galaxy. You think fear is something you cause, not something you feel." "We know no fear, human," the Vorthon replied. "We are the swarm. We are eternal. We are—" "About to learn what Earth considers acceptable casualties," Lee interrupted. He turned to Han. "Deploy Protocol 7. "Protocol 7 deployed," Han said, her voice completely professional despite what she was about to unleash. From the hull of the Nemesis protocol, a cloud of what looked like metallic dust began to spread toward the Vorthon ships. The aliens immediately raised their shields and began evasive maneuvers, but the cloud followed them with unnatural precision. "What is this substance?" the Vorthon commander demanded, its multiple eyes focusing on Lee with sudden concern. "Nanites," Lee replied casually. "Microscopic machines designed by someone who really doesn't like your species. They're programmed to target biological matter, specifically the kind of biological matter that your ships are made of." The first Vorthon ship began to change. Its hull, which had been smooth and pulsing, started to develop holes. Small at first, then larger as the nanites worked their way deeper into the organic structure. "Impossible," the Vorthon commander said, but its voice now carried a note of something that might have been fear. "Our adaptive protocols will neutralize your weapons." "Adapt to this," Lee said, and nodded to Mincio. The chief engineer activated another system, and the nanite cloud began to glow. But instead of simply eating the Vorthon ships from the outside, they started working from the inside out. The creatures had breathed in the nanites when they first detected them, and now those microscopic machines were taking apart their respiratory systems one molecule at a time. The screaming started then, not just from the Vorthon commander on the screen, but from every creature on all 3 ships. Their communication channels carried the sounds of beings who were dying in ways their species had never experienced. "You're torturing them," came Ambassador Sora's voice over the Coalition communication channel. "This is barbaric. This is effective," Lee replied without taking his eyes off the dying Vorthon ships. "Ambassador, your people have been fighting these creatures for months and losing every engagement. We've been fighting them for 10 minutes and they're already screaming." The 3 Vorthon ships were now barely recognizable. Their organic hulls had been consumed from within, leaving twisted frameworks of metal and bone. The creatures inside were still alive, still conscious, still screaming as their own bodies betrayed them. "Please," the Vorthon commander whispered, its voice now weak and broken. "Make it stop." Lee looked at the creature with cold eyes. "You came here to eat civilians. You destroyed entire worlds. You turned billions of people into food for your swarm." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Now you know how it feels to be prey." The Vorthon commander tried to say something else, but its voice box had been dissolved by the nanites. It could only watch as its ships fell apart around it. "Han," Lee said, "are you detecting any distress signals from the Vorthon fleet?" "Yes, sir. Standard emergency frequencies are carrying the death screams to the main swarm." "Good. Mincio, activate the Pandora array." "Pandora array active," Mincio confirmed. The wreckage of the 3 Vorthon ships suddenly blazed with new energy. The nanites, having consumed everything they could from the biological matter, had formed a massive communication network using the remains as amplifiers. "What are you doing now?" Ambassador Sora asked, her voice shaking. "Psychological warfare," Lee replied. "The main Vorthon swarm just received a very detailed recording of what happened here, but with a few modifications. As far as they know, we didn't just kill 3 ships." Fleet Admiral Kang Dae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet die. Through the massive view screen, he could see the burning remains of the battleship Stellar Dawn. Just minutes ago, it had been home to 3,000 brave souls. Now it was nothing but twisted metal floating in the cold darkness of space. "Sir, we're losing the Thunderstrike as well," reported his communications officer, a young Kethran whose blue skin had turned pale with fear. "They're requesting immediate evacuation." Kang closed his eyes for a moment. The Thunderstrike was one of their newest ships, equipped with the most advanced weapons the Coalition had ever built. If it couldn't stand against these creatures, nothing could. "Grant the evacuation request," Kang said quietly. "All ships fall back to defensive position Beta." The enemy was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They called themselves the Vorthon Swarm, and they moved through space like a plague of insects. Their ships were not built but grown, organic things that pulsed with a sickly green light. What made them truly terrifying was how quickly they learned. The first time the EU Coalition had fought them, their energy weapons had been effective. The second battle, the Vorthons had adapted. Their hull plating now absorbed energy blasts like a sponge drinks water, so the Coalition switched to kinetic weapons, solid projectiles fired at incredible speeds. That worked for exactly 1 engagement, before the Vorthons grew armor that could stop anything the Coalition could throw at them. 3 star systems had already fallen. Billions of people were dead or missing, probably serving as food for the swarm. The Coalition Defense Force had thrown everything they had at the Vorthons, and it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. "Admiral," came a voice from behind him. Kang turned to see Ambassador Yoon Sora walking across the bridge. She was a small woman, even by human standards, but she carried herself with the authority of someone who had negotiated peace between warring worlds. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her face showed the strain of the past few weeks. "Ambassador," Kang nodded respectfully, "you shouldn't be on the bridge during combat." "There won't be much combat left at this rate," Sora replied grimly. She moved to stand beside him at the command console. "How long can we hold them?" Kang looked at the tactical display. Red dots representing Vorthon ships far outnumbered the blue dots of the Coalition fleet. "Maybe 6 hours, 8 if we're lucky." Sora was quiet for a long moment, watching the battle unfold on the screens around them. Coalition ships fired desperately at the approaching swarm while trying to protect the evacuation transports carrying civilians from the nearby colony world. "What about reinforcements?" she asked. "There are no more reinforcements," Kang said. "This is everything we have left. After this, there's nothing between the Vorthons and the core worlds." Sora nodded slowly. She had known this moment would come, had prepared for it even though she hoped it would never be necessary. The Coalition had survived for 200 years by working together, by finding diplomatic solutions to every crisis. But diplomacy meant nothing to creatures that saw other species only as food. "I need to use the quantum communicator," she said. Kang looked at her with surprise. The quantum communicator could send messages instantly across any distance, but it required enormous amounts of energy. They only used it for the most critical emergencies. "Who are you calling?" he asked. "Earth." The word fell like a stone into still water. Everyone on the bridge who heard it stopped what they were doing and looked at the ambassador. Earth was the great mystery of the galaxy, the one species that had refused to join the Coalition. They had made contact 50 years ago, established trade relations, even participated in cultural exchanges. But when the Coalition Charter was signed, Earth had politely declined membership. "Ambassador," Kang said carefully, "you know Earth's position. They've made it clear they don't want to be involved in galactic politics." "This isn't politics anymore," Sora replied. This is survival. She walked to the communication station and began entering codes that only a handful of beings in the galaxy knew. The quantum communicator hummed to life, its crystalline core glowing with a soft blue light. This is Coalition Ambassador Yoon Sora requesting immediate emergency conference with Earth Defense Command. She spoke into the communicator. The response came faster than anyone expected. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of a human man. He looked to be middle-aged with short gray hair and scars covering the left side of his face. Cybernetic implants replaced his left eye and extended down his neck, glowing faintly in the dim light of whatever room he was in. Ambassador Sora, the man said in a gravelly voice. I am Admiral Park Ji-woo, Earth Defense Command. We've been monitoring your situation. Then you know why I'm calling, Sora said. We need help, Admiral. The Vorthons are going to overrun our defenses within hours. Admiral Park was quiet for a moment, his organic eyes studying something off-screen. When he looked back at the camera, his expression was unreadable. The Coalition has never wanted Earth's help before, he said. Your leaders made it very clear that our methods were too aggressive for civilized space. Sora felt heat rise in her cheeks. It was true that many Coalition members found human military doctrine disturbing. Humans fought wars in ways that other species considered excessive, even barbaric. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Admiral, millions of people are going to die, she said. Whatever differences we've had in the past, surely we can put them aside now. You're asking us to send our people to die for worlds that aren't ours, Park replied. For people who have spent decades telling us we're too violent, too dangerous to be part of their civilized society. The bridge fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle. On the tactical display, another Coalition ship winked out of existence. Kang felt his heart sink. They were running out of time. What do you want? Sora asked quietly. I want you to understand what you're asking for, Park said. If we send backup, it won't be our regular military. Those are good people who follow rules and worry about civilian casualties. The situation you're describing requires a different kind of response. What do you mean? Sora asked, though part of her already dreaded the answer. Park leaned forward, his cybernetic eye focusing on her with uncomfortable intensity. We have units that we don't talk about in polite company, Ambassador. People who we keep locked away because they're too dangerous for normal operations. If you want our help, that's what you'll get. The ambassador looked around the bridge, seeing the fear in the faces of her colleagues. Another explosion lit up the view screen as a Coalition cruiser broke apart under Vorthon fire. How long would it take them to get here? She asked. They're already on their way, Park replied. I gave the order as soon as we detected the Vorthon fleet movement 3 days ago. But Ambassador, I want you to understand something very clearly. Yes, you asked for backup, but what's coming isn't backup in any sense you understand. We don't do reinforcements, we don't do support operations, we do total warfare. Park paused, his expression growing even more serious. You won't like what arrives, but the Vorthons will like it even less. The communication ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sora stared at the blank holographic display, wondering if she had just saved the Coalition or doomed it to something worse than the Vorthons. Admiral, came a report from the sensor station. Long-range scanners are detecting a single ship, dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Kang looked at the tactical display with confusion. One ship? That's Earth's backup? Sora remembered Admiral Park's words and felt a chill run down her spine. Something told her that one ship might be more than enough. The modified distress signal worked exactly as Captain Lee had planned. Within 6 hours, long-range sensors detected the entire Vorthon swarm changing course. 200 hive ships, carrying millions of creatures, were racing toward the Kepler system at maximum speed. On the Coalition flagship, Admiral Kang watched the sensor readings with growing horror. They're bringing everything, he said to Ambassador Sora. The entire swarm is coming here. Sora nodded grimly. She had been trying to reach Captain Lee for the past hour, but the human ship had gone completely silent. The Nemesis Protocol had moved to the edge of the local asteroid belt and was apparently doing something that made Coalition sensors give impossible readings. What could one ship possibly do against their entire fleet? Admiral Kang asked. Sora remembered Admiral Park's warning about Earth's methods and felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. I don't think we want to know, she said. On the Nemesis protocol, Chief Engineer Oh Min-seo stood in front of a holographic display showing the asteroid belt around them. Her hands moved through the air, manipulating virtual objects that corresponded to very real and very dangerous modifications she had made to the space around them. Report, Captain Lee said as he joined her at the engineering station. 80% of the belt is now under our control, Min-seo said. I've seeded approximately 12,000 asteroids with recursive field generators. When the Vorthons arrive, they're going to find that normal physics have become more like suggestions. Lee smiled his cold smile. Min-seo's specialty was taking the rules that governed reality and finding ways to bend them until they screamed. The recursive field generators were her latest creation, devices that could create pockets of space where quantum uncertainty became macroscopic. What about the quantum mirrors? Lee asked. Fully deployed, Min-seo replied. We now have 47 identical copies of the Nemesis protocol scattered throughout the system. Each one is just as real as we are, at least until someone tries to interact with them directly. Lieutenant Commander Han Yu-jin looked up from her psychological warfare console. Captain, the Vorthon fleet is maintaining standard formation. They're treating this like a normal military engagement. Of course they are, Lee said. They've never encountered humans who actually wanted to fight them. They think they know what warfare looks like. He walked to the center of the bridge, where a three-dimensional map showed the approaching Vorthon swarm. Each red dot represented a hive ship carrying thousands of creatures who believed they were the apex predators of the galaxy. Han, what do we know about Vorthon psychology? Lee asked. They're a collective consciousness with limited individual identity, Han replied. Each creature shares experiences with the whole swarm through biological neural networks. Their greatest strength is that they learn from every encounter and adapt instantly. And their greatest weakness? The same thing, Han said with a predator's grin. They all feel everything that happens to any of them. Trauma spreads through the entire collective, like a virus. Lee nodded. Min-seo, are the Protocol 9 systems ready? Protocol 9 is loaded and ready, Min-seo confirmed. Though I should mention that using it on this scale might have permanent effects on local spacetime. Acceptable losses, Lee said without hesitation. Ambassador Sora's voice crackled over the communication system. Captain Lee, please respond. We're detecting massive energy readings from your position. What are you doing out there? Lee activated the communication link and his image appeared on the Coalition bridge. Behind him, the crew of the Nemesis protocol worked with deadly efficiency at stations covered in displays showing things that violated several laws of physics. Ambassador, Lee said pleasantly. We're preparing to teach the Vorthons about human military doctrine. Captain, that's their entire fleet coming at us, Admiral Kang interrupted. Over 200 ships. Even with whatever you've done to those asteroids, how can you possibly— Admiral, Lee cut him off. Your people have been thinking about this all wrong. You've been trying to fight the Vorthons ship to ship, weapon to weapon. That's not how Earth wages war. Then how do you wage war? Sora asked. We don't fight battles, Ambassador. We create nightmares. The first Vorthon ships entered the asteroid belt 30 minutes later. The Coalition fleet watched from a safe distance as the alien vessels began moving between the floating rocks, their organic hulls pulsing with anticipation of the coming battle. That was when Min-seo activated the recursive field generators. Space, around the asteroid belt, suddenly became something that would have made theoretical physicists weep. The normal rules about cause and effect, about matter and energy, about the speed of light itself all became optional. The Vorthon ships found themselves facing not one human vessel, but dozens, each one occupying the same space while somehow remaining completely separate. What is this? Came the panicked voice of the Vorthon hive leader over open communication channels. Our sensors show multiple targets, but they cannot exist in the same location. Welcome to human physics, Lee replied calmly. We've found that reality is more flexible than most species realize. The Vorthon fleet opened fire on the nearest copy of the Nemesis protocol. Their weapons passed harmlessly through it, striking the asteroid behind it and causing a massive explosion. But the human ship remained completely undamaged. Impossible, the Hive leader said. Matter cannot exist in multiple states simultaneously. You're thinking too small, Lee said. Han, initiate Protocol 9. What happened next would be talked about in xenopsychology textbooks for centuries to come. Protocol 9 didn't attack the Vorthan ships directly. Instead, it attacked their collective consciousness itself. The neural networks that connected the swarm suddenly became weapons turned against them. Every death, every moment of pain, every sensation of fear was amplified and shared among all 200 ships simultaneously. When one creature felt terror, they all felt it. When one died screaming, they all experienced that death. But Han had done something worse than simply amplifying their shared experiences. She had introduced feedback loops into their neural networks, the fear of feeling fear, the terror of experiencing terror. Each emotion fed on itself, growing stronger with every cycle, until individual Vorthans began to lose their minds from the psychological pressure. Make it stop, the Hive leader begged over the communication channel. Please, we surrender. We yield. Make it stop. You don't understand, Lee said, his voice carrying no emotion at all. There is no surrender in Protocol 9. There is only learning. The Vorthan ships began to break formation. Some tried to flee the asteroid belt, but found that the recursive fields had trapped them in a maze where every exit led back to the center. Others simply stopped moving as their crews became catatonic from the psychological assault. Captain, Ambassador Sora's voice was barely a whisper. You're destroying their minds. I'm teaching them, Lee corrected. The Vorthans have spent centuries believing they were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They've consumed entire worlds, enslaved civilizations, turned billions of people into food. Now they're learning what it feels like to be prey. On the tactical display, the Vorthon fleet was falling apart. Ships drifted aimlessly as their crews, huddled in terror from experiences their species had never evolved to handle. The creatures who had once moved with predatory confidence now screamed in languages that had no words for the kind of existential horror they were experiencing. Minseo looked up from her console with something that might have been concern. Captain, the psychological feedback is beginning to affect their basic biological functions. If we continue much longer, they'll start dying from neural shock. Good, Lee said. Han, broadcast their current state to the rest of the galaxy. Full spectrum, all frequencies. I want every species in known space to see what happens when you threaten human allies. Broadcasting now, Han confirmed. Across the galaxy, millions of beings watched as the most feared military force in known space collapsed into gibbering insanity. The Vorthan swarm, which had destroyed entire star systems, was being systematically broken down by a single human ship using weapons that attacked the mind itself. This is what Earth calls backup? Admiral Kang asked in horrified fascination. No, Lee replied over the communication link. This is what Earth calls a demonstration. The real backup hasn't arrived yet. As if summoned by his words, long-range sensors detected new contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Dozens of ships, all bearing the same energy, signature as the Nemesis Protocol. Admiral Park sends his regards, Lee said, and he wants you to know that this is just the beginning. The galaxy has been playing war games while Earth has been preparing for actual war. You asked for backup, Ambassador. What you got was a glimpse of what humanity considers acceptable tactics. The Vorthan Hive leader made one last attempt at communication, its voice broken and strange. What are you? Lee looked at the screen where the alien creature cowered in the wreckage of its once mighty fleet. We're the species you should have been afraid of from the beginning, he said. We're humans, and you just learned why the smart civilizations don't pick fights with us. The reinforcements that dropped out of hyperspace were not what anyone expected. 12 ships, each one different from the others, but all carrying the same dark energy signature as the Nemesis Protocol. They moved through space with purpose that made even experienced coalition officers feel uncomfortable. Admiral Park Ji-woo's flagship, the final option, took position at the center of the formation. Unlike the sleek curves of coalition vessels or the organic shapes of Vorthan ships, Earth's Special Operations Fleet looked like they had been designed by people who understood that sometimes the only answer to a problem was overwhelming violence. The coalition flagship, Ambassador Sora, watched the tactical display with growing unease. The Vorthan fleet was still trapped in Captain Lee's nightmare maze of recursive fields. But the creatures inside the ships had stopped screaming. That somehow made it worse. "Admiral Park," she said over the communication channel, "the situation appears to be under control. Captain Lee has neutralized the Vorthan threat." Park's scarred face appeared on the main screen, his cybernetic eye focusing on her with uncomfortable intensity. "Ambassador, Captain Lee showed you what one human ship can do. We're here to show the galaxy what happens when Earth decides to end a threat permanently." "What do you mean?" Admiral Kang asked. "The Vorthans aren't just a military problem," Park replied. "They're a biological hazard that has consumed 3 star systems. Standard military doctrine would be to defeat their fleet and force a surrender. Earth's doctrine is different." Sora felt cold dread settling in her stomach. "Different how?" "We don't believe in leaving threats partially dealt with," Park said. "The Vorthan swarm has proven it can adapt to any weapon, overcome any defense, and learn from every encounter. That makes them an extinction-level threat to every peaceful species in the galaxy." On the tactical display, the Earth ships began to spread out through the system. Each one took position at strategic points around the asteroid belt where the Vorthan fleet remained trapped. Captain Lee's voice came over the communication channel. "Admiral Park, Protocol 9 has been fully effective. The enemy collective consciousness has been fragmented. Individual ships are no longer able to coordinate with each other." "Excellent work, Captain," Park replied. "Begin Protocol Omega." Sora had never heard that designation before, but something about the way the humans said it made her skin crawl. "Admiral, what is Protocol Omega?" Park looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Ambassador, the Vorthans reproduce by consuming other species and converting their biological matter into new swarm members. They've done this to billions of people across dozens of worlds. Protocol Omega ensures they can never do it again." "How?" "By making sure there are no Vorthans left to reproduce." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Complete extinction. Not just military defeat, not just surrender, but the total elimination of an entire species from the galaxy. "You can't be serious," Admiral Kang said. "There are protocols, laws about genocide. The Coalition would never approve." "The Coalition isn't conducting this operation," Park interrupted. "Earth is, and we follow Earth's laws, which state that some threats are too dangerous to be allowed to continue existing." On his ship, Captain Lee was already implementing the new protocol. The recursive fields that had trapped the Vorthan fleet began to change, becoming something far more sinister. Instead of simply confusing their senses, the fields now started to unravel the quantum bonds that held matter together. "Mincio," Lee said to his chief engineer, "initiate total molecular breakdown. I want every organic component of those ships reduced to base elements." "Understood, Captain," Mincio replied, her hands dancing over controls that would have made pacifist species declare war just for existing. "Beginning systematic disintegration of all Vorthan biological matter." The Vorthan ships began to simply come apart, not exploding like normal vessels under fire, but dissolving as their organic components were broken down atom by atom. The creatures inside didn't even have time to scream before they stopped existing entirely. "This is murder," Sora said, her voice barely a whisper. "No," Park corrected. "This is problem-solving. The Vorthans made themselves a problem that threatened the survival of every peaceful species in the galaxy. Earth specializes in solving problems that other people can't handle." The dissolution of the Vorthan fleet took less than an hour. 200 ships carrying millions of creatures simply ceased to exist, their matter converted into harmless elements that dispersed into space. But the Earth fleet wasn't finished. "Captain Han," Park said to one of his subordinate vessels, "begin long-range tracking of Vorthan biosignatures. I want every hive world, every breeding colony, Every outpost they've ever established. Tracking commenced, Admiral, came the reply. Detecting Vorthon signatures in 17 different star systems. Sora realized with horror what they were planning. You're going to hunt down their entire species? Yes, Park said without any emotion at all. The Vorthons represent an existential threat to galactic civilization. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be reformed, cannot be trusted to coexist peacefully with other species. The only logical solution is complete elimination. But there might be peaceful members of their species, Admiral Kang protested. Non-combatants, perhaps even dissidents who oppose the swarm's actions. Park's cybernetic eye focused on the Admiral with mechanical precision. The Vorthons are a hive mind, Admiral. There are no individuals, no dissidents, no non-combatants. Every member of their species shares the collective responsibility for the billions of lives they've consumed. The Earth fleet began to move out of the system, their destination clear. They were going hunting, and they wouldn't stop until every Vorthon in the galaxy was dead. Ambassador, Captain Lee's voice came over the communication channel. You asked Earth for backup. What you got was an extinction event. The Vorthons threatened human allies, so we solved the Vorthon problem permanently. This will change everything, Sora said. When the galaxy learns what Earth is capable of, how they think about warfare. Good, Park replied. It's time the galaxy understood what happens when you threaten species under Earth's protection. We don't fight wars, Ambassador. We end threats. The Coalition fleet watched in stunned silence as the Earthships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them weapons and methods that violated every convention of civilized warfare. They were going to hunt down an entire species and erase them from existence, and they seemed to consider it routine maintenance. What have we done? Admiral Kang asked. Sora looked at the empty space where the Vorthon fleet had been. Not destroyed, not defeated, simply erased as if they had never existed at all. We asked Earth for help, she said quietly, and they gave us exactly what they promised. On the final option, Admiral Park stood on his bridge and watched the star charts showing known Vorthon territories. 17 systems, dozens of worlds, millions of creatures that would be dead within the week. Admiral, his tactical officer said, long-range communications are detecting distress signals from multiple species. Word of our actions here is spreading. Let it spread, Park replied. The galaxy needs to understand the new reality. Earth is now an active participant in galactic affairs, and we play by our own rules. Sir, what about the Coalition? They seem disturbed by our methods. Park smiled, an expression that didn't reach his organic eye. They'll adapt. They asked for our help, and now they have it. Whether they like our methods or not, they're under Earth's protection now, and Earth protects what belongs to it. The tactical display showed the locations of every remaining Vorthon settlement in known space. Soon those red dots would begin, disappearing one by one until none remained. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to have humanity as an ally. It was also about to learn what happened to humanity's enemies. The Vorthons had made the mistake of threatening human allies. In response, Earth had decided they no longer deserved to exist. It was, Park reflected, a very human solution to an inhuman problem. 6 days later, the last Vorthon hive world went silent. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The species that had terrorized 3 star systems, consumed billions of lives, and seemed unstoppable in their expansion, had simply ceased to exist. Not defeated, not driven back to their home territory, but completely eliminated from the universe. Ambassador Yoon Sora stood in the Coalition Assembly Hall on the capital world of Nexus Prime, watching delegates from 100 different species argue about what Earth's actions meant for the future of galactic civilization. The debate had been going on for 3 days without resolution. The humans have violated every principle of civilized warfare, declared the Zephyrian representative, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. Complete extinction of an entire species is genocide of the highest order. The Vorthons were consuming our people, countered the Kethran delegate. 3 of our colony worlds were stripped bare, billions dead. What would you have had us do? Find a diplomatic solution, the Zephyrian replied. There are always alternatives to total war. Not with the Vorthons, said Admiral Kang, who had been invited to give his military assessment. They were a hive mind dedicated to consuming other species. They couldn't be negotiated with because they didn't see us as people, only as food. The debate continued, but Sora wasn't really listening. Her attention was focused on the observation deck where a lone human figure stood watching the proceedings. Admiral Park had arrived on Nexus Prime that morning, ostensibly to discuss Earth's formal application for Coalition membership. Sora excused herself from the assembly floor and made her way to the observation deck. Park acknowledged her approach with a slight nod but continued watching the delegates argue below. They're afraid of you, Sora said. Good, Park replied. Fear is a useful emotion when properly applied. It prevents people from making stupid decisions. Like asking Earth for help? Park looked at her with his cybernetic eye. That wasn't stupid, Ambassador. That was necessary. The Vorthons were a threat to galactic civilization. Someone had to deal with them permanently. But did you have to eliminate their entire species? Sora asked. Surely there could have been survivors, prisoners, non-combatants. The Vorthons were a collective consciousness, Park said patiently. Every individual was connected to the hive mind that decided to consume other species. There were no innocents, no non-combatants, no prisoners worth taking. They were all equally responsible for the billions they killed. Below them, the Axiom Collective representative was speaking about the legal implications of species extinction. The machine intelligence's voice was cold and logical, as it outlined the precedents and protocols that Earth had ignored. What happens now? Sora asked. Now the galaxy adapts to a new reality, Park said. Earth is no longer content to sit on the sidelines while peaceful species are threatened by predators. We're taking an active role in galactic affairs. The Coalition will never approve of your methods. The Coalition doesn't have to approve, Park replied. They just have to accept that we exist and that we're not going anywhere. Earth is applying for membership, but we're not asking permission to defend ourselves and our allies. A commotion from the assembly floor drew their attention. The delegates had received new information that was causing heated arguments across the hall. Sora activated her communication device to listen to the debate. Reports are coming in from 17 different sectors, the Kethrin delegate was saying. Species that have had territorial disputes with the Coalition are suddenly requesting immediate peace negotiations. Aggressive powers that have been expanding their territory for decades are pulling back to their home systems. They're scared, the Zephyrian representative said with obvious distaste. The humans have terrorized the galaxy into submission. The humans have demonstrated that there are consequences for threatening peaceful species, Admiral Kang corrected. Perhaps that's not such a bad thing. Park smiled at the debate below. The Vorthon elimination wasn't just about solving an immediate problem, he said to Sora. It was about sending a message to every other species in the galaxy. Earth protects its allies, and Earth's enemies don't survive to threaten anyone else. You've made the galaxy a more dangerous place, Sora said. No, Park corrected. We've made it a more honest place. The Vorthons weren't the only predator species out there, just the most successful. There are others who have been watching and waiting, looking for signs of weakness. Now they know that threatening Coalition worlds means facing Earth's response. A new voice joined the debate below. Captain Lee Tae-min had entered the assembly hall. His presence caused an immediate hush among the delegates. Most of them had seen the recordings of what he had done to the Vorton fleet. Honorable delegates, Lee said in his cold, professional voice. I've been asked to address your concerns about Earth's military methods. I'm here to clarify our position. The hall fell completely silent. Even the usually chattering Zephyrians stopped their crystalline chiming. Earth doesn't seek conflict, Lee continued. We prefer peace, trade, and cultural exchange. But when peaceful species are threatened by predators, we respond appropriately. The Vorthons chose to consume billions of Coalition citizens. We chose to ensure they could never do so again. You committed genocide, the Zephyrian representative accused. We solved a problem. Lee replied without emotion. The Vorthons were a cancer that would have eventually consumed every peaceful species in the galaxy. We removed that cancer permanently. What about due process? What about attempts at communication or negotiation? Asked the Axiom Collective. The Vorthons communicated their intentions clearly by consuming 3 star systems, Lee said. We negotiated by offering them the choice to stop their aggression. They chose to continue. We implemented the logical consequence of their choice. The assembly erupted in heated arguments again, but Lee simply turned and walked out. His message had been delivered. Earth would not apologize for its methods, and it would not change them. On the observation deck, Park watched his subordinate leave with approval. Captain Lee is very good at his job, he said to Sora. His job is killing entire species? His job is solving problems that other people can't solve, Park corrected. Sometimes that requires extreme measures. Sora looked down at the arguing delegates and realized that Earth's application for coalition membership was going to pass despite all the moral objections. The galaxy needed Earth's protection, even if they didn't like Earth's methods. What happens to species that threaten the coalition now? She asked. They get one warning, Park said. If they're smart, they listen. If they're not, he didn't need to finish the sentence. The fate of the Vorthons had made Earth's position clear to every species in the galaxy. 3 months later, the Coalition Assembly voted to accept Earth as a full member. The vote was closer than anyone had expected, but fear of future threats outweighed moral objections to human methods. The galaxy had gained powerful protectors, but at the cost of introducing a species that saw total warfare as problem-solving. Other predator species pulled back to their home systems and began seriously reconsidering their expansion plans. Captain Lee received new orders and a new ship. There were other threats out there, other species that preyed on the weak. Earth's special operations units were now permanently active, hunting monsters in the dark between the stars. The universe had learned that when you asked Earth for backup, you didn't get reinforcements. You got exterminators. And somewhere in the void where the Vorthon Empire had once existed, the silence served as a permanent reminder of what happened to species that threatened humanity's allies. The galaxy would never be the same again.